6.7 Cummins. This is an early style 19mm cascade valve. You can see here. We're going to do the 10.6mm conversion on this pump. Show you what all is involved in that. First thing we're going to do is just a used pump. No idea about the internals. Now you may encounter, these are probably fine, but you may occasionally encounter one of these screws that just doesn't want to come loose. There's a couple ways you can do it. The best thing to do is get you a punch that fits down inside this Torx, the splines of the Torx, and just give it a couple of whacks and it'll stretch it, and then you'll be able to get it out without stripping it. So that one would have probably been fine, but make sure you wear safety glasses if you do that. Now we're going to pop the cover off of it. I use a plastic hammer so I don't mess up the surface. I've got an O-ring stuck up there. And got some rust. So I'll probably put this thing back in the ultrasonic and clean it some. Let me get a bucket to drain it in. Well, I used to have one. Used to have a little bucket that I'd drain it in, but I've moved it somewhere and I don't know where I've put it. I don't think there's that much in it anyway. I'll probably just pour it out on this rag here. Okay, I'm going to clean it again anyway. It's just a mixture of nasties. Now if and when, well ain't no if you're watching this video, it's just a matter of when you go to do this. One of the best indicators if your pump is a good candidate to do this, inside this port here. I don't know how well you can see it. That one's pretty clean. If you've got rust up in that port, your pump probably isn't going to be any good to do an upgrade on. So that's the best indicator. Rust in the port is the best indicator of the condition of the internals. Because if it's had rust go through there and it's actually set up and it's growing, then the internals of the pump, they're probably going to be damaged in some way through wear. A lot of people don't know this and they don't understand, so a lot of these pumps are really bad for breaking this drive tang off of the back of the shaft. You see this rust that's built up here? And you certainly see it on the back of this supply pump. So what will happen is, you know, especially in the northern states, and I can feel that, it's a buildup there. Especially in the northern states, you know, where they use, you know, whatever they use on the roads to get rid of snow and ice, salt, whatever, you know, this stuff's highly corrosive. And when it gets between these two surfaces, it actually grows into a thickness. And it can grow so much, I've seen it happen a multitude of times, the growth pushes against this cover and it'll actually lock the gears up inside of here and break that shaft. And it usually always messes the gear pump up too. So that's something to certainly be wary of. And if you're going to pull this thing down and do this to it, typically you're only going to get a like an etching of this. There's no actual buildup here. It's more just a discoloration on this side. All this is going to get cleaned anyway, but I'm going to show you how to deal with it. You know, you're going to have this pump apart to begin with. This is not really a concern. Like I said, there's really no buildup here. It's just, you know, it's discoloration more than anything else. But on this side, yeah, this is steel, so it's actually going to rust. Let me grab a razor blade. So you could potentially, stick something up in these ports, but you're going to have a hard time getting it back out. You can probably blow it back out with air, but you're going to have this thing apart anyway, and I'll show you how these passages, they cross over to the other side over here, and you can blow them out. So typically what you want to do is you just get you a razor blade, hold it 90 degrees to the surface, and just go over it like this. You're not going to get much up in those ports. You're going to clean it anyway. And that's pretty much it. We got that off. Now, you may find cases where it's way worse than that. And, you got to do something more to it. I'm going to recommend that, if it has to be more than that, you probably just need to replace the pump, because you're going to have pitting and everything else going on. So next thing we're going to do is we're going to press the shaft out of this pump. Now what you want to do when you go to press this thing out, you'll look at what's called the polygonal ring inside the pump here. You can see it probably stick up there just a little bit. So what you want to do is you want to get the most surface area that you can get to press against, and the way that you're going to do that is you're going to have it exposed here and exposed here, so you're going to press against those two areas. That's what this is being held against, you see. Now I'm going to go press this thing out, and then I'm going to come back and we're going to go through the rest of the process. So I've got the pump cleaned up, and I'm going to compress the tappets and remove the polygonal ring. So I don't know how well you can see it, but there's a depression in the, you can see it right here, this area in the tappet. We want to grip it right here. So we're going to hook our tool right over that edge there. You see that? So a lot of times you just have to take a plastic hammer, and I'm sitting on my press tool because this is a 5.9's Cummins CP3, 5.9 Cummins CP3, 6.7 Cummins CP3. I'll get it out here in a minute. It's got a fitting in the back, so if you don't do this, then the pump's going to be setting crooked. So we're going to compress all three. All right, this is called the polygonal ring. We're going to inspect it. Now you're going to see a little wear pattern on the flats. We don't want to see any silver, which would indicate that we've had substantial wear enough to go through the coating. And whichever one is going to actually wear through, that tappet's going to be eat up pretty good. So next thing we want to do is we want to pull our rear bushing out and our rear thrust washer. It's this piece right here, and we'll show you how to locate this thing back in the tangs when we go to reassemble it. Now if you don't fully compress these tappets, you're not going to be able to get that rear bushing out of there, because the tappets are going to protrude into the round area. Hear that? 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So we've definitely got enough room with that one. This is a press fit. The shaft presses into this. Well, we'll just get to doing it now. Now I always reference the wide area of the pump with these, these side fittings as the top So you got 1, 2, 3 going in a clockwise orientation. Let me go over here and get the shaft and the tappets. Yeah, you can pull this thing all apart if you want to. That's up to you. I see no point in doing that. I mean, if you know you've got a good running pump off of your truck that was running, then it should be no issue. If you're buying a core, maybe you want to pull it all the way apart. I don't know. That's up to you. I can pull the tappet out and kind of show you what things look like. An indicator of the condition of the pump, when you pull this out, you ought to hear a pop. You hear that? Bloop. Put it back in there so you can hear it again. Very tight fit here. And you can see it's fighting against me. It's got that hydraulic effect. So we'll pull it out again. You hear that pop? So that's going to tell us give us an indication of the sealing ability of these. If you pull them out and there ain't no pop, you push them in and there's no hydraulic effect. Well, if these are completely dry, you may not get a hydraulic effect when you push it in. Like compression against, you're pushing against compressing air. May be an indicator that you got problems with your pump. These are DLC coated. That's why they're black. That's why the polygonal ring there is black. This is a coating to prevent wear. That's the whole purpose of it. So I'm going to stick this one back in. See nothing wrong there. And I don't see many bad pumps. I mean, used to the old LB7, LLY, and 5.9s. Yeah, they're more susceptible to wear because they don't have this coating on the tappets. So you're going to want to get you some kind of a lubricant, a thin oil. Even WD-40 is probably fine. It's got thicker film than diesel fuel. I use this. It's called fluid film. And kind of smear it around the outside edge here and the flat surface. You want to cover that. And then we're just going to, after I get a rag and wipe it off my fingers, we're just going to put that tappet back in. And what you'll want to do, push it in and get it started before you start pressing on it. Alright, that's actually started on number 2. It doesn't matter where you start or which one. There's no order or orientation for these new replacement tappets. And be careful when you pull this trigger because there is spring tension behind it. And it could give you a whack. I like this fluid film because it expands. Seems to be some pretty good stuff. And these things can get slippery, so be careful when you're pressing them back in that you're actually staying on the edge with your tappet compressor tool. So I do the outside and do the inside, just the bottom edge of the inside, and then I do the flat. Try to make sure I'm staying in frame here. And I always like to do this a couple of times. Make sure it's seated up in the hole and there's no obstructions or anything in the way. And we'll just simply press it down. Now when we go to put this rear thrust bearing in, make sure you don't forget it. So it's got those 3 tangs. Let's see if we can get a visual on this. So you see the 3 tangs in there as well. They look like a complete circle here. So what we want to do is, so this one has 2 on one side and 1 on the other. So we're just going to put it back in, make sure that it's all the way down. And then we're going to put a little lube on this inside and out and against the thrust areas. Just a little lube going on. Drop it back in. Okay. Now we're going to lube up our polygonal ring. We're going to do the 3 flat surfaces. We're going to do both sides of the thrust and the bushing. I don't know if you're old enough to remember space dust. It was a candy and you put it in your mouth and it was like, give you like this crackling sensation. This lubrifilm does the same thing under your fingers. You feel it like popping, like little bubbles popping. Pretty cool little deal. Now we're going to get rid of our Tappet compressing tools. And we're going to lube up our shaft. And you'll notice there's a flat ground onto the back of the shaft. This is the way we've done, golly, 15 years worth of them. And you can see there's just a tiny little flat area, and that's to give us the clearance for the bigger stroke. And it works. Never had an issue with it. So, but you may say, well, I don't have enough surface contact. I promise you, I've done thousands of them, up to 12.6, 13 millimeter, you know, in some cases, experimental type stuff. And it works. It works. So now what you've got to do here, you see that we're kind of aligned hole within the hole there. You see the rear bushing that's silver. You see the hole through this bushing here, the coated bushing. So we've got to get this thing over to the side to get the shaft in it. You understand what I'm saying? Because it's an eccentric. It's offset. You see it here. You see how far it's offset. So we have to offset this polygonal ring when we're putting this shaft back in. Now, one thing you're going to want to do, let me grab one because I don't have one laying. Yeah, I don't have one laying here. Get the nut for the shaft. So take your nut and don't put it all the way on, because we're going to have to tap on this just a little bit to get this thing started. So I typically take a punch. This one may be too big. I normally use a smaller one, but I know that one's going to be too big. Let's get this one here. Now you could do it with a screwdriver too, or here we go. May work even better. Got a T20 Torx. So I'm going to push this thing essentially all the way back, and then I'm going to put the eccentric in that rear back position. And I'm going to look, and I see I need to go a little bit more. So right there is where we are, and we're lined up, and we're going to tap it down in to get it started. Now I'm just barely putting pressure on it. And you'll see as you're going, it'll start going in. Alright, that's good enough. Just barely tapping, I'm not beating on it. Okay, there's a difference. I have seen occasions, even with these, you know, the tappets, which are exactly what we need for this, that sometimes they've pressed these, well, it's a machining plug. It's for access to machine the other sides. Everybody calls them a freeze plug because that's initially what they were called. So you need to check, and we'll check this one once I press the shaft in, and I'll be back right after I do that. But once you put the cover on, you need to make sure that this thing will rotate a full 360 degrees without interference. If it doesn't, a lot of times you can pull the cover back off, and you can put the round part of this polygonal ring like right up against where it's hitting. So what you would do if there is interference, don't turn the shaft once you locate the interference, and pull this cover back off. And then wherever the obstruction is, if you just tap this nut to the side, you know, and you got to do it like a 45-degree angle so you're not getting that rear thrust bearing to come back up out of there. A lot of times you can just do that, and you can knock the freeze plug over just enough to get the clearance you need. So I'll be right back after I do this. Alright, I've got the shaft pressed in. If you're not careful and that thrust washer comes back up out of those locating tanks, you know, the 3 little half circle areas, and you press it in there, you're going to mess that thrust washer up. Now, if you catch it, you can take it back out. You've got to disassemble everything, and you can go like on the anvil of a vise or some flat surface and take a hammer and flip the thing over, and you can flatten it back out. I'll try to show you one that's been messed up. That one's not been messed up, but I get people that try to do these DIYs and they end up trying to send me their pump. And we have fixed a couple of them, but look, I don't have time to fix all these screw-ups. So pay attention to what you're doing, and you can look in there once you get it in, and you can say, yeah, I can see that locking tab, and it's in it. You may have to shine a light down in there. So first thing you want to do is rotate this thing over and make sure it's free. Now the springs are going to give you some feedback and pressure against this shaft. So every time you rotate it, it's going to be essentially oscillating in there, and it's not going to be held concentric to the bore until you put the cover on it. So that's what we're going to do now. We're going to put the cover back on it. Now I like to take this stuff, because that rust I was telling you, and smear a little on these surfaces. It helps lubricate the O-rings. I'm reusing these O-rings. Now people may say, oh, I would never reuse an O-ring like that. I'm going to tell you something. You're not going to buy something aftermarket that's as good as these things. And I've done this thousands of times, and rarely have I ever had an issue where I've had to go back and change an O-ring. Now, we have had to change out a few seals, especially in these later models. They don't have this Viton type seal. They've got some black piece of crap they put in there to cause premature failure in these pumps. Well, it'll cut such a groove in this shaft. I mean, it's really crazy. So we've got all of our O-rings in here, as you can see, and we're going to put the cover on. So we've got a couple of passages we can line up. I think these are the two. 1, 2, and 1, 2. We've already got our shaft lubricated up. And I'm going to get some screws here. Now, don't force this cover back in place. You can generally, you hear that? I weigh about 205 pounds. Used to weigh 250. I lost about 50 pounds, praise the Lord. Just push it down like that. That's enough, really. Start you a couple of screws so the cover's not going to twist on you. And put the nut on there, and you should be able to rotate it by hand with no issues. We're free. Turns free everywhere. So I can go ahead and put the bolts in it. Now, of course, the video for the modification of the cascade valve is in your account on our website. So you're going to see what to do there. And then I just tested one of these yesterday. Did the same process. Torque spec, okay, 140 inch-pounds. Okay, so we're done there. Turns free. Probably going to use a socket to get that nut back off. A lot of times you can do this little trick. Just tap one of the flats of the nut. You can get right back off. So we're good. There's a 10.6, and if you look at yesterday's video, I'll put a link in the description here for it. You'll see exactly what to do, and there's not much more to it. You do the cascade valve and you're done. Be careful. If you got any questions, drop them down here in the comments. If you've bought one of these and there's an issue, or if you're someone who's getting ready to do this and you have a concern of this or that or something else, a good cleaner is Evapo-Rust, and I dilute it with water and another chemical, and I really don't want to share that because I'm not a chemist. Works for me, but if you get it under your fingernails, it's not very nice to fingernails, so I think I'll keep that to myself. But you can take some Evapo-Rust and dilute it some with water, distilled water, in an ultrasonic that is heated. and it will bring rust off like it's nothing. One thing last thing to do is the supply pump. Now, I've checked this thing. Like I said, this is a used pump. I've lubed it up and checked it, make sure everything was okay. We did not enlarge these passages. We used to. We thought it was some kind of a game because, we thought we'd really figured something out. But it don't give you nothing to up the size of this passage. A possibility it might reduce cavitation. I'll probably test it again, but it's not worth any gain that I have found that's appreciable. So there's really no point in doing it, in my opinion. So, and another thing too, when you're tightening this thing on, don't get carried away. It doesn't have to be like super tight. You can actually deform the case of this thing if you do over tighten it. So I'll typically bottom the bolts. And that's it. That's all we need. Make sure that it turns again. Because if you get a piece of dirt or debris in there, you're going to snap the end of that shaft off. And it's going to be a sad, 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 sad day for you. So just make sure that, that it still turns over. And it does, and you may hear some squishing sounds as it's actually trying to do a little bit of pumping. And once again, just tap one of the flats of your nut and it'll come right off. And that's it. Other than the testing, this thing flowed 200 so the actual displacement is 295 liters per hour. The one we tested yesterday flowed like 293 or something at its maximum.